thanks for tuning into Power Athlete Radio. The world needs more coaches like Stacey Torman. Stacey has built her career around sports performance, and even with the myriad of successes she has to choose from, she believes her greatest accomplishment has been making an impact on an athlete's life that extends beyond sport. Coach Torman is the Director of Athletic Performance for Olympic Sports at UAB and holds the title of Vice President for the CSCCA. A standout volleyball athlete at Texas A&M herself, Stacey is no stranger to the challenges faced by student athletes. Hear how she's refined her approach to training at the collegiate level and her success in collaborating with sport coaches. Her even-keeled demeanor and 25 years of experience arm her with the perfect balance of temperament and knowledge. It's no surprise that she's been a valuable fixture at UAB, changing the lives of so many young athletes over the course of her career. What's her secret to longevity in a field with notoriously high turnover? Find out now. This is episode 196.
Power Athlete Nation, what is up? This is the premier podcast in strength and conditioning. Tex McCulkin here, joined with Callie, the full Hinsman, and our special guest, Stacey Torman. How are we doing, Stacey?
Great. How are y'all doing?
Doing good. Callie, it's been a long time. Why don't you update our listeners on what you're up to? Let them check in, and then we'll get right into our performance talks.
What I'm up to, I just lit myself a vanilla candle, so I'm ready to start this podcast. Still in Seattle. Let's see. Since you guys stopped coaching the CrossFit football seminars, I actually received a call from Greg Glassman asking if I would take over the CrossFit football seminars. So that's what I've been doing.
And when does that start for you?
Every weekend. And what's amazing is they've all been selling out, and I've just been doing them weekend after weekend. I've had no problem with signups or anything.
Or travel. How's the travel?
Travel's been phenomenal. No issues with travel. Never any layovers.
Now I know you're lying. So let's get right into it, Stacey. So I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. And the reason I reached out to you and wanted to connect is I'm interested kind of in your experience and any advice that you can give to a lot of the strength and conditioning coaches that are on that journey to really become a master in the biz, and especially at the college level. So I'll hand it off to you. Go ahead and break us down.
Well, I'm so thankful y'all asked me to do this. It's exciting that y'all are taking this and just, listening to some professionals that have, like you said, it's that have been on the journey. And my career's been a journey. I've only been at University of Alabama, Birmingham for 25 years, and that's the only place I've been. So that's where I've kind of drawn my experience from. But I was also a student athlete at Texas A&M, played volleyball there, and met a man named Steve Javorek. I don't know if you've spoken to him at all. Coach Pop is what we called him. And he mainly did track and field, but he does a lot of the dumbbell complexes and that kind of thing. And, I'd weight trained since I was probably in high school, since sophomore in high school, but he changed how my body responded to weight training. And so that really just sparked my interest, and didn't know that even strength conditioning, other than him, was even a profession at the time. And I was majoring in exercise physiology, thinking I was going to be a PE teacher, something like that. So fast forward about a year, I was going to start coaching volleyball, and got a call from UAB, the volleyball coach, and she asked me, since I had a background in athletics and some strength and conditioning, she asked me if I would train her volleyball team, but also coach the team. So when I came to UAB, I was a graduate assistant doing both. And at one point, just nobody else was doing any of the other teams. So I started training the tennises and the men's soccer, and basketball had their own guy. But so I just, as more teams got to working out, we only had about 10 intercollegiate teams, or maybe 12 at the time. So it was just me and all the athletes, and I just fell in love with that part of it, and just started transitioning into doing that more, and doing less recruiting and that kind of thing, and traveling. And fortunately, the head coach, she was she was on board with me and wanted me to do what I was passionate about. And so I continued to train her team, but transitioned into doing strength and conditioning full time. And so when I got my master's degree, then I finally, they started paying me, which is, at the time, that this was a long time ago, we had that restricted earnings coach. So I was making $12,000 for several years, just on that journey and trying to make ends meet, and had another job at the same time. And so after, I'd say in 1996, when they started with Title IX kind of coming in the forefront, we added football. We had to add more teams. So it was basically like me getting a brand new job every other year, because we added softball and women's soccer and synchronized swimming. And so it was just me expanding my horizons and working with teams that I'd never worked with before. And so,
so Stacey, therein lies my first question. I know you said you've worked with like 16 out of the 18 teams there. Mm-hmm. Was there 2 teams that you were just like, I don't want any part, and training them?
Well, no. I mean, synchronized swimming was, to me, it was more the challenge.
Yeah.
I don't swim, first of all. And
Tex, I think we should look into synchronized swimming as you and I as competing.
There you go.
Well, I was going to ask if Stacey had these athletes synchronize weightlift in preparation of the demands of the sport. Specificity, right?
Would they be in the water or not? Oh, sorry. Would they be in the water? I mean, is it sport specific if they're in the water? If they're land-based?
No, that changes the color of the water, and then everyone knows.
Well, if they're wearing swimming caps. This is part of our, and I'm sure you hear this joke all the time too. People are like, sport-specific training. I'm like, if it involves barbells in the weight room and they're swimmers, it's probably not sport-specific if it's in the weight room.
That's pretty difficult.
Yeah, pretty accurate. You're like, oh, but I digress.
And we digress, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. It's, the movements that they do are just very different than any sport that I will ever work with or have ever worked with. So, and to their credit, they were one of my hardest working teams. Very punctual, very just disciplined. We worked out very early in the morning, just like most swimmers do. And it was a pleasure to work with them. They became ranked like number 3rd in the nation. Ohio State, kind of reigns over that sport, but they took
How many synchronized swimming teams are there really, though? There's got to be like 4.
Yeah, now because it was an emerging sport and it never hit 40, so they had that's why we cut it. So yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. There's still a national and an Olympic team, but
some young Alabama female who wanted to be a synchronized swimmer will never be able to achieve that dream.
Right.
Ironically, I actually went to school with girls that were synchronized swimmers. Actually, in the dorms, my freshman year at Berkeley, there were 2 girls that were synchronized swimmers that were training for the Olympics.
Yeah.
Like they're like it was a weird thing. Like they their ground-based training was like gymnastics. They ran like these girls. Like I remember talking to them once. I'm like, "What are you guys training for?" Like, "Oh, we're synchronized swimmers. We're training for the Olympics." I didn't know what these girls were training for. I thought they were training for like a death race. Like they were
parkour.
They were deciding on like blueberry and we're like literally like ran, trained, like their training was phenomenal. And I'm like, how long are you guys in the pool? They're like, oh, we're in the pool like 6 to 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. I'm like, when? They're like, oh, it's 4 hours in the morning. We start at 4 to 8 a.m. and then we train and we go to school and then we go back at like 7 o'clock at night until 11 o'clock. I mean, it was the amount of work that those girls did. I mean, we kind of scoffed. I was like, synchronized swimming. And then when they started explaining what they did, I'm like, so wait a minute, you guys hold your breath underwater while you're doing basically ballet gymnastics underwater synchronized? I'm like, how do they even judge that? Like, that was my other one. It's like, how did they effectively judge that?
Yeah.
I was like, are there people in the pool? I mean, are there cameras? Like, how do they do it? And, yeah, it's intense. I mean, but I think the country that dominates it the most is usually the Eastern European countries.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's big in China and some of the other
North Korea.
But Stacey, I know a lot of strength and conditioning coaches get into this training their sports just like you did. but then you started to take on all these sports, like you said, synchronized swimming, in which you had no experience. So what was your approach to then taking on these teams? And how did you learn about the sport or learn about the movement?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it was talk to the coaches, because especially with soccer, we didn't have soccer in Minnesota where I grew up for boys or girls. So at the time, so it was really just constantly picking their brains. Obviously, a lot of reading and researching. Especially synchronized swimming was hard because there wasn't a lot of there just weren't any college teams to talk to about it. So actually had one of my graduate assistants, Scott Charland. He called Donald Chu, who wrote the book on plyometrics, and apparently he was coaching the national team at the time for some reason. And so he called him and just picked his brain, and we just, kind of focused on the things that he prescribed for us. And the tennis and, kind of some of those sports that were similar to volleyball, I kind of used my experience with volleyball and the movements and that kind of thing. And really just, we didn't have internet at the time, so it was more just reading and I just showed my age there, sorry. Reading and researching and articles, and you didn't really call coaches at the time either. Everything was pretty much top secret, back in the 80s. Nobody shared information like they do now, and everybody's a lot more free about sharing anything and everything that they have to make all athletes better.
So how have times changed, like besides the internet? Are you now an open book to share your training techniques? Are other coaches that way, or are you still kind of experienced a lot of hard-minded coaches out there?
No, I think, I've done a lot of maybe not really podcasts, but just probably monthly, our staff does a phone call or a Skype just discussion basically with another staff at a school, or we actually just had a local gym owner come in and spent about 2 hours with us just teaching us kettlebell swings and kettlebell deadlifts and Turkish get-ups and that kind of thing. And because he's an expert on it, or that's what he does with his clients. And so and Stuart, my education coordinator, Stuart Young, he wanted to just bring him in and glean from him, because I guess he had gone to one of his classes and he just had so many cues and different things that we weren't using that we could definitely utilize in teaching our student athletes, because there's just so many things out there that you can't touch every athlete with every word. So, one word for one athlete might mean one thing, where another one you might get them to do exactly what you want them to do. And so he had a lot of good progressions and regressions that he took us through, which was great, so that we're teaching them, but we're also, not moving forward with them too quickly, so that they're not learning, the basics of every movement. And then he kind of took us through what's the next step after you get all these kettlebell exercises, into front squats and back squats and that kind of thing. So, but yeah, so to answer your question, we haven't found anybody who said, I don't want to. We even talked to Mike Boyle. He was on for about 30 minutes with us in between some of his sessions, and just, kind of talked about his FMS preparations and that kind of thing. So from the big dogs to the lowliest of strength coaches, everybody seems to be really willing to share, and it's been great.
That's been our experience. And we had Mike Boyle on, and I had read his thing about the death of the squat, and really kind of didn't really agree with as much as his unilateral movement and prioritizing over some bilateral hip hinging. And we had him on the podcast, and had a great, incredible podcast. I connected on so many levels, and how he got to where he was with his philosophy was based off of dealing with injured athletes. And I had these hockey players that couldn't do things. And so, I'm making these, assumptions, and a lot of my, training philosophies based off of what my guys can and can't do. And he's like, you got to remember, I'm not dealing with, 100% healthy guys. We're dealing with top end athletes that have, injuries, and we're trying to find a way for them to work at a high level around their limitations. And I think I had one misconception about him, and I really didn't like the things that I'd read. But after we got off the podcast, I was like, dude, I would hang out with this guy and go
more
train
aligned
with him.
than not.
Yeah.
We have discussion forums on our site, Stacey, and you hear people be like, Mike Boyle says this. What do you say? And I guess we did diligence. I guess, and he does firm stance, surface level on a lot of the stuff he writes. But then when you get back, you start understanding contextually, where does the philosophy come from? And that is guiding principles of overload, of progression, of moving through space and empowering performance. It's like, well, we're speaking the same language, we just have different tools.
But as she said, I mean, here is, the advent of the internet, where, not only can you not explain, to people, like there's, more that goes into this because everything's so superficial. It's like trying to explain some sarcasm or humor over the internet. You type something, try to be funny, and people take offense, and you're like, no, that's
it's not funny.
Is that? I know, but oddly enough, regardless, we can still get Kelly to laugh. That's what we do. But
it's hilarious.
But that's. Have you seen? I mean, what we've really seen with the internet, with so much available information, is the rise of the internet coach, where everybody's an expert. And unfortunately, a wise man, or kind of a wise man, once said, you fail at the margins of your experience. And I think, with today's world, you can kind of sit back and either watch videos or read and kind of, take these, I guess you could say, almost like a sterile point of view, where, people don't really know who you are and make a lot of claims, where it just seems like, the practical knowledge of dealing with athletes over 25 years, trumps that to me any day. And actually seeing and working with people and, taking them through the life cycle of, let's say from a freshman into a senior, or potentially into a, professional type sport. Have you, has anything really changed within, with the advent of the internet, or really, adjusted your coaching, or has it just increased your circle and made people more approachable and easier to connect with?
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Just the moment by moment experts in the field, in a 30 second little spiel on one exercise, to claim that you're an expert on certain things, it can become a little daunting, but I think overall it's been a good experience, especially the ones that do the series of things like Kelly Starrett. We've gone through, one summer I went through all 94 of his things, and just it kind of let you get to know him, and it gave, instead of watching just one and going, oh, I don't agree with that, I got to see kind of his philosophy as he got to explain it more and more with each podcast, and so that was good.
Did you feel like you were more supple at the end of it?
Oh, yes. Like a leopard.
I've known Kelly for, almost like 10 years now. And I remember when he was telling me about the name of the book, The Supple Leopard, I was like, dude, it's a terrible name. He's like, no. And I always kind of laugh at it. Joke. I'm like, so how do I get to be level 99 Supple Leopard? He's like, oh, it's going to take a So no, it's but I mean, his stuff, like for him, he really started that mobility project as he just wanted to offer, one a day, and it really just kind of really grew into something. And it was things that he in his clinic daily, and he was like, his gym was in a Connex box, and he had like a little like weird, almost like looked like a broom closet for an office, and he was indoors in a parking lot. And like had like a 6-month wait for people to get in there. And I remember being like, the facility doesn't matter, the weights don't matter, location doesn't matter, people will find you if you're really good. Right. And he was really a testament to that.
Sorry, I was going to ask the question just because I don't want to get too far removed from when you brought it up, but you said that one of your coaches was very impactful on you, your strength conditioning coach, and that was a time where you felt you were, I guess, achieving the greatest results or the greatest performance transfer. So I'm just curious, looking back on that now with some knowledge and experience, was it the training itself? Was it the timing? Was it you as a mature athlete? What were some of the big factors of that? And have you incorporated some of the same ideals in your own coaching?
Yeah, I think it was that not to discredit anything with A&M's program, but at the time it was mostly graduate assistant football coaches that were doing our training and really just supervising what our coach wanted us to do. So I really, we squatted and we did a lot of what's it called, the air pressure at the time. I forget the name of it, but was it kind of like Kaiser, but it was the air pressure machines, that kind of thing. So a little bit old school. And so we didn't do a lot of periodization, or it wasn't really a planned out workout. It was more like circuits and that kind of thing. So once I got with Coach Pop, it was, because I played volleyball, it was very power oriented, and he had a 12-week plan for me, and I knew where I'd been, where I was going, where I was at the time, and where I needed to get to. And part of your question was, as far as where I was as an athlete, I think that had a lot to do with it too. I had weight trained for so many years, doing bench and squat and just kind of traditional stuff. This was kind of a shock to my body. But as far as like my vertical jump, and I don't know that it was more sports specific. It just was more functional for me, and the power and the explosiveness that I needed to achieve. Mm-hmm. And maturity wise, it was the summer before I was getting ready for my 5th year, which was my final year. And then my goal was to play. I had a dream to play either for the national team, or they had just started the professional league that year. So in my mind, I had bigger aspirations than just my senior year or my final year of college. So maturity wise, I was probably more motivated as well. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure that probably played a bigger part in it as well. But that's a great question.
I'm curious, kind of just alluding back to our previous talk, how have athletes changed? So all this information is readily available. So have they been in experienced high school programs? Are athletes coming in just because they're interested in this stuff and checking it out? So how's the athlete changed over the time you've been coaching?
Yeah, I think it's really kind of sport by sport. Basketballs, footballs, obviously, they tend to come in with a little bit more experience. I do men's soccer and women's soccer. Very few of them have touched a weight in their careers unless they played another sport. Volleyballs, usually they've done some sort of, they've been taught the Olympic lifts and that kind of thing, but maybe not, they've not been progressed into them. It's more just, here's a power clean. It's going to give you power, so do it, kind of thing. So we do a lot of correcting of bad habits with them. But tennis, really, I'd say probably 75% of the kids are not getting good experience in high schools as far as good programs. They may be taught exercises pretty well, but not really a good program that helps them get better. But I've thought a little bit about this as far, we had this generation of supposedly kids that are in front of the TV a lot more, in front of the computer, playing video games and that kind of thing. But kind of what I've found is that the middle of the road athletes are coming in a little bit less prepared. We talked about being athletic. They're less athletic. They've played their one sport for a lot of their career, and so they're not as mobile as they probably could be if they'd have done multiple sports or trained differently. But I personally think that the elite athletes that are coming to UAB anyway, they're elite. Like they come in prepared. They may not have lifted before, but they can tolerate a lot more force. Their bodies are just primed a little bit differently. And so they tend to make bigger gains when they come to college than the moderate athletes, because moderate athletes, they've got all that, their neuromuscular system's got to figure it all out, and it just takes them a little bit longer to adapt to a lot of things. So I have a high schooler, and they aren't really in front of the TV, in front of the computer a lot, as much as you might think they are. But and again, that's just my experience with his generation. Anyway, he's 17, but the college kids that come in, I think they're having that same experience. I think it just kind of boils down to the lack of multi-sport athletes and just not consistent programming within sports, really. In the high schools, I think a lot of them are like the PE teachers are teaching some things, but I just don't think it's really caught on in the high school, other than football and basketball per se. And again, there's exceptions to every rule, but that's kind of been my experience with our athletes anyway.
Yeah, volleyball I envision is just one of those sports, especially specializing. So baseball, volleyball, those are those 2U sports that, I mean, it's almost the same repetitive motion over and over.
Right.
So when you get those freshmen in there, it's what's your approach to not only teach them how to lift, but also do you do any assessment to see if there's kind of past stuff that they don't even realize has been going on?
Yeah. That's funny you said that word, because that was the first word I thought of. Was we assess them. We do the FMS, and I'm not saying that is the end all be all, but we have something that we can get a number from. We can just kind of find out what imbalances they're having. And our staff has this conversation all the time, like if you have a baseball player, and I know y'all know about the FMS, the shoulder mobility. If you have a guy that's got a 1-3 imbalance, could that possibly be what makes him special, or do we really need to get him to a 3-3 or a 2-2, So we battle that a little bit, but we focus a little bit more on trends with our FMS on per sport. We're not quite, because we all have so many teams and athletes that we're working with, it's hard to specialize and take one athlete and say, these are your specific exercises right now. So that's our goal. We want to get to that point so that every athlete has exactly what they need to work on. But we definitely assess them and try to find out kind of where their starting point is. And then with we've got just recently in this last year, we've put together a kind of a standard sheet where we've got, or standard groups where we've got, kind of like Baylor does. I don't know if you know about that. He's got several groups, but we have our developmental group, which is our green group, and we have a white group and our gold group. And the gold group obviously is the elite, the ones that you're trying to get to. But we have standards as far as to get out of the white group. You basically have to just have all your techniques down with kettlebell front squats or front squat, or you have to be able to lift front squat your body weight, or just different standards so that we don't rush you out, even if it's your sophomore year before you get out of white. It's just the way it is, and we'll take our time before we start building on you.
So that's a great approach, taking that life cycle to an athlete and making sure they're prepared to enter a program. I have had a conflict with a sport coach, and it was taking all freshmen and making sure that they were training with the rest of the team. So while we went in with a plan to have them kind of go through their assessment and then progressions and kind of earn the platform, the coach saw after 1, 2, 3 days, he said, nope, I need them with the rest of the guys. Have you found a constructive way to communicate with sport coaches to kind of really either, I don't want to say push back, but kind of get the right way for the athlete in terms of their performance and health?
Right. Two things, and that has happened to me as well, and I'm sure every strength coach has probably had to kind of address that issue. But the first thing is, the coach is always right. Unfortunately, it's their kids. You kind of have to defer to them on a lot of things. When it comes to a safety issue or something like that, I always, and this is one of my advice to all of our interns and GAs, is you always, even though you don't agree with them, you always say to them in a professional manner, I understand what you're saying. Professionally, I don't agree with that, but we'll make it work, and you obviously have to do what you think is right also, but I think there's always a medium in there. And I think, in that situation, I can always, although they are working with the rest of the group, maybe my white group is doing kettlebell front squats where the other ones are doing front squats, but there's still that team camaraderie. They're still together. They're not, I don't have them over here doing this and the other group over on the other side doing that. So it gives kind of the illusion that they're all doing the same thing, and just kind of being careful in the exercises that you choose so that you don't pull them, so it doesn't look like you're pulling them away from the other group. It's still getting done what you want done and still giving the coach what they want. But I think it's really important that especially as a young professional, I had a hard time, agreeing with a lot of things because I was a young professional. I knew everything and you're going to do it my way, and coaches don't know anything. And I just learned that, it's their athlete, and I've got to do what I need to do, but they're going to lose their job before I lose my job. If their primo athlete gets hurt or something. So I understand what you're saying, Coach, and here's why I disagree with you, but if that's what you want, we'll go with that.
Have you seen a rush of military style training that sport coaches want to apply in order to build camaraderie or mental toughness or anything like that?
Yeah, I think our basketball team brought in somebody that with our former coach, kind of like a Navy SEALs kind of thing. But I haven't seen a huge influx of it in lately, but I don't agree or disagree with any of it. I think there's a place as far as motivation and, like you say, camaraderie. And I think there's some, my fear is with rhabdo and all that kind of stuff on the forefront of the news, that sometimes if you either have a type A athlete who's going to win at everything and be number one at everything, you run a risk of, hurting somebody like that. But also just the camaraderie. And I think there's good ways of implementing that kind of training into any program, because training leaders, getting kids to be one unit with that group mind, that should be the main issue, the main focus of it, rather than breaking them down or conditioning them.
Do you have any leadership development or special things that you implement in your weight room to develop that or bring that out to the athletes that they have?
Yeah. So it's our staff is reading a book called Legacy. It's about the All Blacks rugby team, and we're trying to implement just a few things that things that we can control while we're putting our kids through our workouts or warm-ups or whatever. But it's not leadership training or anything like that, but it's utilizing the student athletes and the gifts that they've got. We all believe that on our staff that each one of our kids is a leader in some way, shape, or form, and that could be positive or negative. But part of our role in the hour or hour and a half that we have them is to help those individuals use their leadership skills, whether it's in a small group or with the whole group. And it's simple things as who's calling the cadence out, when we're doing a wall drill or something like that, and making sure that they learn how to project their voice, and that when you're not a leader, you're following. And being respectful of the person who's in charge of whatever it is. If they're leading the warm up, we try to get it to a point where our student athletes are leading the warm ups, so that we're not all, we're, as long as we've taught them everything we want them to do and how we want it to run, then we slowly try to let the reins go on that. But just little things like that. They're not, again, it's not like a big leadership session or anything like that, but we do some motivational type things with each team. But so we've learned a lot.
Is that practice for you, Stacey?
Is that
is it a new practice for you to inject that for your student athletes, or has that always been part of the protocol?
It's been a little bit more on purpose now. It's before it was more of the team captain should be doing it all the time, and that's their responsibility. But now I have a warm up leadership team basically. So these 4 guys, they're once I've taught them how I want the warm up to roll, then I let them take over, and then we also meet and say, hey, let's focus on this today. Make sure you interject these things into the warm up kind of thing. So there's accountability, and they feel like they're leading the team for real.
Yeah, I ask because, there's, I guess, not to get too off topic, but there's the generational gap, the millennials, the, I guess, wussification, lack of leadership, lots of followers, not a lot of chiefs type deal. And, as a coach, you have a lot of influence on the long-term characteristics of an athlete. I was joking with Harry Shaw, who we're working out at his gym. I was on a hike with him. He was talking about getting a tattoo, and I got this awesome tribal armband, Stacey, that in 1995 would have been killer, but now I just look like a dude. Like, I look like an idiot. But I'm like, it kind of represents when I was on top of the world. I had great coaches that were guiding me and honestly drilled in a lot of the things that I think make me who I am today, and willing to suffer and grind out and do all this shit. So I'm like, yeah, this is my badge of honor. It's my tribal armband from 1999. But I digress. So what I'm getting at, though, is that kind of the motivation behind it. Is there is a long-term, like you're building habits for long-term development and success for student athletes, because what percentage of them are going to leave university and get to play their sport for a living? Like a slim amount. But as a strength coach, you get to instill those values through simple drills like this. And you're running cadence on wall drill. No, project your voice, be confident,
Right. Yeah, and it's been interesting to see just, some of the ones that you thought were leaders on the team and that people were listening to, they get up there and they can't do 2 things at once. They can't call out a cadence, and they can't dorsiflex their foot and keep their mind, or they get embarrassed and they, like you said, they don't project their voice. They don't really want to be heard, but they want to be heard. So it's a simple thing, but it's giving them confidence in who they are, and to have 23 other guys listening to you and doing what you tell them to do when they tell them to do it's pretty empowering. So.
And you just said dorsiflex, which is basically Texas buzzword.
Actually, that's a trigger word for that.
It's a trigger.
Yeah. My ears perked up, but yeah. I mean, this.
Hear dorsiflex and his eyes glazed over. That's one of his triggers. It's like it's like the word Trump to like the protesters. So just the word alone just sends them into fury.
But I like dorsiflex. It's plantar flex.
Well, I was going to say, when you hear plantar flex, then like Tex's eye starts twitching.
But what we're talking about is pretty high level coaching, and just kind of amazing opportunity that I get to travel a lot. I get to meet a lot of coaches, and their conversations are a lot of sets and reps. But I want to try to get into, all right, how are we going to integrate leadership development? How are we going to have our athletes find their voice? How are they going to practice communicating with their team while still maintaining their dorsiflexion, their position? Because guess what? That's a demand of sport, is you're maintaining your responsibility while still communicating. And like we write and talk a lot about this, and we just call it mutual accountability. in which, one, you are accountable for, one, your performance, and two, your athlete's performance, and you're holding them to the standard that you are holding to yourself, and so on. And it just starts to really, that's what we see really carry off into the field, that swagger, that confidence, more so than the squats and the sets and the reps. So it's empowering just hearing you talk about that. And then you are instilling this into your coaches and your athletes so that they can take it on to their next step, and so on and so forth. So awesome. Callie, you have any more questions?
Well, I have like 1,000 questions, obviously. But on that subject, Stacey, you ever meet an athlete who's just purely like a good athlete, but just is never going to be a leader, and it's never gonna be like that standout captain, but fits in very well with the team, and it's not one of those. It's not a personality type where you feel like the effort of pushing them into that role, or even trying to educate them or empower them in that way is I don't want to say worth it, but it doesn't suit them.
Right. Yeah. I think, we definitely have a lot of athletes like that. And I think like sport coaches, I think sometimes because they're the junior or the senior on the team, that they should be the leader. And like you said, maybe they don't want to be the voice, but I think it just kind of goes back to your role. I don't know if y'all ever saw that YouTube video it was in a park, and the guy goes out, he's dancing in the park, and then everyone's just kind of looking at him, and finally one person comes and starts dancing with him, and then everybody starts coming. So sometimes it's not the leader, it's the one who follows and to start the movement. I think it's called Start the Movement or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was actually Luke Summers who
was there a tribal armband on the left bicep?
I think so.
It was me.
Now that I look back. But just, sometimes the leader needs that guy, that follow-up guy that's always going to have your back, and
sure.
Just help you go to the coach when there's stuff going on with the team, and just go to the coach and say, hey, this is what's going on, and that person go, yeah, we need to do this. I forgot what your original question
That's
was.
okay, because I have more questions. That's
Okay.
all right. So, having worked with so many athletes, so many teams, and I think you're being like far too humble for all your accolades, and we can get on to talk about that in a minute. But, which, in terms of your experience as a coach, which stand out to you to be like the most validating as a coach? You can also just say this podcast right now.
This podcast right now.
Yes.
Drop the mic.
Podcast and strength and conditioning.
Yeah. I think it sounds funny, but it's just the kids that come back and with memories, of what could even been. And I'm a Christian, and I pray with some of my athletes if it's okay with them. And sometimes they'll come back and, they were stressed during the workout, and I could just tell something's wrong with them. So I've talked to them afterwards, and they come back and say, the day you just sat down with me and asked me what was wrong was, I didn't want to talk about it, but it meant a lot to me. Just things like that. That's kind of the other side of coaching, but it is coaching, and it is, being a leader with those kids. And they go through a lot of crap, and it's not always, like somebody else said, it's not about the numbers all the time and putting up 225 on the squat just because it's testing day. Everybody's got good and bad days, and sometimes you just want to be heard or somebody to listen to you. And so those are the more fulfilling things. But
Sure.
On the performance side of it, it's those kids that do come in kind of mediocre, and maybe they don't become the elite athlete of the team, but they get out there and they contribute way more than they thought they were going to, or they do put up some good numbers and they're proud of themselves. And you just see, like somebody else said, the swag, and their demeanor is different because, they kind of like weight training now. And, it's not just, some coach making them big and huge,
Mm-hmm. Or maybe it is.
Well, it unlocks
That's okay too.
it unlocks the possibility of accomplishment, right? So it's like something that was deemed or they believed was not obtainable. You show through a certain methodology, consistency, hard work. Just listen to your freaking strength coach, basically, right? You can play that of life and hopefully get similar results. Sometimes get knocked down, but that's where trying to get some young kids involved with what we do here. That's where they always fall. They're not willing to put in the grind. They don't trust that at the end of the grind, there's going to be some sort of payoff or learning event. And I don't know. It just goes back to like athletics does provide that. And I think a proper coaching staff and a proper, I guess, strength and conditioning program too. Because think of some of the people we've tried to groom who just fell off, and it's like, well, that guy didn't play team sports, or vice versa, stuff like that.
Well, we've also had numerous people that have come in and worked for us and thought that, hey, I'd like to be a strength coach, and then all of a sudden they talked to some strength coaches, and like my favorite was we had a kid interning, and we had our summer our symposium, and Aaron Osmus gets up and he talks about that he was an athlete in the grind, and like the trials and tribulations of being a high level strength coach, and after what did the kid say? He's like, I don't think I want to be a strength coach.
It was that night, that night he called me up. He's like,
it's not for me.
It's not for me. I'm not willing to put in that type of work. Right. And I'm like, well,
better to find
we
out
come
now.
with coffee tomorrow and it's your last day.
but like, you have to always remember not everything's for everybody. And, the idea of like going in and trying to groom somebody in terms of human performance is sometimes, very often kind of a thankless job where people don't see the immediate return on investment. And everybody's expecting, in this kind of the iPhone generation, what we see is where everything's so immediate. Now you're talking about like, the training we're going to do today is going to lay a groundwork for not next year, but 2 and 3 and 4 years down the road, where I need you to be a top level performer. And I don't think people have the ability to see that vision. And, for me, especially coming in, I played football in college and thereafter, and coming in as a young guy, there was this idea that you have to be able to do this amount of work so that it can, there's a stair-stepping effect that I need you to be able to do X by the time you're junior and senior and play, and then go on and play after that. So I think it's interesting. Just like it seemed very natural to me, but it seems kind of hard to explain to people these days. So I don't know why.
I wonder if it'll get harder too as coaches are younger. Will those coaches now have that same mentality where they want those quick results, faster? Not that coaches don't want that now, but I think, like you said, this generations coming up are used to that. So do they want that immediate, performance?
Well, if you think about the function of weightlifting or training or anything you're doing, it's the idea of driving adaptation. And, when I talk about, somebody asked me, they're like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, think about evolution on like a longer scale, right? You think about driving adaptation within, just a short period of time. If you, just the example, and I had somebody recently ask me about playing football. They were like, how do NFL players survive those hits? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, if I got hit like that, I would die. How do guys take those hits day in and day in? I'm like, well, think about this. When I was 13, 14 years old and I put on a helmet and I started hitting, I was hitting against kids that were 13 and 14, and we all lifted weights and got bigger and grew and matured. And over the course, like the hits become harder and harder, and you pretty much, almost condition yourself to be able to take them over a lifetime. And that's, earned in the gym and the training and all these other deals. You just didn't go from like step one at 14 years old, all of a sudden, getting hit by a 300-pound, 30-year-old man who's trying to kill you. And I'm like, that's the maturation process that you have to be able to go through this evolution. And if you don't, you don't prepare yourself. And like, for me, that's the metaphor for training that, if you want to squat 500 pounds, you have to, squat 135. You have to be able to work through the progression of all this stuff. And it takes time. And, and if you don't follow the right path, or you follow, the wrong progression, and you've seen this too, the inappropriate training at the wrong time within an athlete, life cycle of their training, and all of a sudden they have injury, or it retards growth, or, they all of a sudden, stumble and fall. It's almost like things have to follow in progression. And it's trying to explain that to people, I think, is it's almost like kind of beating your head in the wall a little bit. I mean, we've talked.
Well, it's the hack
hundreds
because people believe there's the hack or the pill, right?
Yeah, well, that's
and we,
the,
you know,
well, yeah, it's the biohackers, right? Yeah, we'll hack this.
Is there a pill for that?
Same could be said when we're talking about athleticism as coaching development, because you're getting coaches that graduate from college, maybe they go do a grad assistantship, and then they're expecting to be getting a job right away, versus kind of putting in the grind where you've got to take a few internships. And like Luke, you and I have had the conversation about a sense of entitlement. And Stacey, I don't know if you're starting to see this with more and more interns as you get new kids every year kind of working in your system. What's been that evolution of the coach in terms of, I guess, attitude and willing to put in the long hours that you've grinded through?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just with we've gotten to a point where we have to have the interns sign a waiver that states that they understand that the hours that they put in are for their education, not for monetary gain. And to have to put that in writing, it bothers me, but you don't want any lawsuits. So, because apparently somebody came back and tried to sue a school because they put in all these hours and they got nothing out of it. Well, yeah, you did. You got all my expertise. You got to watch all these top level coaches coach. You got to work with athletes, you know, and find out if that's what you want to do as a profession. That's a gift right there, you know. And I know of one intern for sure that after about 3-4 weeks asked when they could have their own team, and we said bye-bye. So because once you kind of cross that threshold, it's, you know, it's not going to be a pretty picture after that. So because they're going to be, you know, they're going to be disgruntled anyway. So I'd rather they just move on. But for the most part, we've kind of, I think because we work so hard as a staff and they see that, you know, we're pretty much there most, you know, we don't work terrible hours. But I think they see that there is downtime. There are benefits to working sometimes 12 hours in a day, that you do have. May is pretty, you know, relaxed. December is pretty relaxed depending on what teams you have. But I think the interns that we get, I think we weed them out as far as when we select them, not once they get there, but just making sure that we tell them the real deal. You know, you know, put as much work in as you're going to get out of it. And so, you know, it may not be what you want to do professionally, but better to find out now than.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's a self-selecting type thing. I mean, as far as people wanting instant gratification and having to sign waivers and equating the time that they're actually spending at the gym to some sort of, I don't know, financial compensation or something. I mean, I feel like all of that, it's a sort of self-correcting thing. So who cares if we're part of a generation that's very instant gratification, because all it's going to do is fine-tune, hopefully, the people who are actually in it for the right reasons and who are going to stand the test of time, I hope, because those people are going to be ultimately the ones in the higher up position, the head strength conditioning positions, eventually who make it that far, who are going to be the most impactful, right? Hopefully that's the goal. So.
Right. Exactly.
And Ron McKeefery said it amazingly in I think our last episode, but he just said a coach needs to get to the point where they're finally able to learn. And then that really just kind of struck a chord for me. It's, you know, coaching for 5, 6, 7 years and finally at that position where I can compare it to all these other programs or base it off principles.
Are you there yet, Tech?
Oh, John, as soon as Ron said that, I made it.
I'm going to have to defer to the peanut gallery.
the loose behind the keyboard. This guy is like, he thinks that the computer's a word processor or something. I don't know.
You got Hinton over there.
He's got
literally
selective learning disorder.
like holding her face, like laughing hysterically. All I can see is her eyebrows.
I'm just mouth breathing. Oh yeah, my bad.
I'm like sitting next to Darth Vader. I keep waiting for him to be like Edward or who is it? Spock in Star Trek.
Okay, all right.
No,
Spock from Star Wars?
Data or Data?
So-
Data
Did he blow up the Death Star?
Yeah, Death Invader.
All right.
Oh, God.
Back on track, Kelly. So, Tex, where are we at now? We finally stumped you.
I gotta do a
Well,
plug.
no,
I gotta do a plug for Ronnie McKeefer. You gotta watch the podcast he did on resumes, writing resumes.
Ooh, competing podcast. Ooh.
Yeah, are there other podcasts?
A must
Well, the fact that it's on resumes.
I think it was y'all though, wasn't it? I think it was.
Well, that's an important
I think it
component.
was
Is like understanding how to self-promote without sounding like an asshole, and like putting the meaningful information
Sure.
instead of like the things that you think are important that have nothing to do with your job you're even looking for, or the role that you could play on a team, right?
A resume is just a collection of Instagram selfies, right? Or am I wrong? Okay.
Yeah.
That's it.
And tweets.
Okay, got it.
Kelly, are you regularly accepting resumes from people?
for to be my personal assistant.
Well, Luke, you missed the most.
I'm not accepting any resumes for friends.
Well, Luke and John, you missed the first minute in which Callie explained what she's been up to, and she's taken over the CrossFit football seminar. So she's booking every weekend, selling out.
Congratulations.
And she needs assistance.
Thank you. You know what's funny is your intern who told you he couldn't do it anymore at the symposium. I'm not going to say that was a direct result of my having spent some time with him, but
did you accept his resume?
He's
like, so tell me really how it is, and you're like,
he's now employed by Hinsman and Company, so it's fine.
He is
and
company.
Yes.
Stacey, I had a conversation with a coach in which they said all the training that we do, so an athlete, preseason, in season, all this training, they didn't consider it prehab. And I took the side of, yes, this is prehab. So I'm just curious of your take on all the strength training that you do. Is it preventing injury, or what would you, qualify this as?
I love this question. To me, it's what I do is twofold. It's help with performance and hopefully prevent the risk of injury. I'm not going to be able to prevent an ACL tear from happening. Some things just happen, but I believe that everything that we do, from the warm up to regen sessions to lifting weights to conditioning, it's all rehab, or it's all prehab. It's all the reason that we do it is so that you don't get hurt. Just like he was talking about taking hits. That's you lifted weights since you were 13 years old. That's prehab. That's you preparing to take
injury prevention. Isn't that the buzzword? The injury prevention?
Yeah, what we do is injury prevention. Like I said, we can't stop everything from happening, but if it does happen, if you're prepared, then you can recover faster. I do use the word prehab for like prehab shoulder exercises and that kind of thing, but really every exercise that I do besides that's overhead push, pull, whatever, it's all preparing that shoulder to take maximum swings, maximum attempts, for volleyball players, multiple throws for a baseball player. To me, that's all prehab. It's all preventative. So.
Yeah, and I've seen Earl Campbell in his old age, and back in his playing days, they did not lift weights because of They thought it would make you kind of slow down, and he was an amazing athlete. But if you look at him now, if he were to take those, if he were to weight train, I know that he'd be a whole different person right now.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree. I will say about the training thing, but I think what you have to remember too, when you see old NFL players, the medical treatments that they got and the knowledge and the drugs that those dudes were given, it was like unconscious. Like those doctors should go to jail. Like they, because you see Jim Brown, and he still moves pretty well, and he's an old. And I remember actually meeting Jim Brown and talking to him, and he's like, talking about the uppers and the painkillers and the
Uppers, downers, laughers, criers, screamers.
I mean, like he was like, yeah, they give you a puppy full of painkillers, and when you drooped out, they give you some uppers. I mean, he's like, dude, like they had all those guys on cocktails. So I think when you see like Earl Campbell and some of those old guys, those guys played with some pretty horrific injuries, and they just basically numbed it up, a little Novocaine, a little lidocaine, so that it stayed longer. Cortisone they would mix in there, and they just do like localized shots, and then just pump them full of stuff. So I mean, you sent me that thing the other day about Tom Brady, and I was laughing with the article that Tom Brady put out. He's like, I basically eschewed the medical staff and brought in my own people because what they were doing was destroying me. And the thing I'm laughing about is Tom Brady at 39 years old looks younger than he does when he was 22. So either he found the fountain of youth, or who knows what he's taking. I mean, he could be drinking like, I don't know, blood of
a unicorn.
Yeah, like unicorn blood.
One unicorn. He's got the one unicorn that exists in
dude,
IV.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, her name is Giselle, I believe.
That's right, Callie.
I mean, dude, you saw Giselle. She got 3 kids, and she still could like walks out in like the Victoria's
Maybe
Secret.
that's it. Maybe it is Giselle.
Well,
Tom Brady, Giselle.
Let me
Or
tell
they're
you,
vampires or something. Maybe they're vampires.
And here's the thing that my wife's a big Atlanta fan, and I told her, I'm like, when I played the Patriots, Tom was great, always super nice to me, and we met Giselle. She was nice. Like they were like, I don't know.
Are they the Flanders of the NFL?
No, they were really like the one thing, they always talk about Giselle being like a bigger supermodel. She was honestly like this big. I was like, she's a bigger supermodel. That girl, I was afraid like a wind was going to take her away, but they were always super nice. And I'm like, maybe being nice
Karma.
is do it. But Tom also had like 5 lockers, and he had a special room where he would get like his treatments, and he had a massage therapist. He had like a team of dudes working on him. And but he didn't go in the medical room. He didn't take any of their painkillers, none of their stuff. And I mean, I think a lot of the guys that I know that are having problems were the guys that really got pumped full of stuff, either the Toradol shots and a lot of that. So actually, I was going to say, could you speak a little on that? Have you seen advances in medicine? Because I remember in college, our strength coaches were kind of in a weird position, almost at battle with the ATCs and the medical staff. So the doctors and the ATCs thought they knew something, and there was always this weird friction between, what I call the ankle tapers, the quacks, the doctors, and then the strength coaches. Do you kind of have a good relationship, or have you seen changes, or how does that necessarily play out?
Yeah, I think with just the whole student athlete experience genre that the NCAA has kind of focused on lately, I think it's the medical industry is really kind of stepped forward almost and said, look, we're in charge. These are the things that we're in charge of, basically. And so I think when they started putting the what's it called? The student health, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, the student athlete health and wellness, I think is what the NCAA calls it. But they kind of put all of us into one group as far as you guys have to start communicating, basically. So, if I've got a kid who's injured, then I need to defer to the trainer, and the trainer needs to defer to the doctor. And so it's almost like there's got to be this chain of command because of liability. I mean, mostly it's sad, it kind of comes down to legalities again, but I firmly believe that if the trainer tells me I can't do something with a student athlete or a movement that they shouldn't be doing, that has to have come from the doctor, and that they're just telling me what the information that I need to know. And from a liability standpoint, I have to kind of abide by that and not test the limits on it basically. But I think at UAB anyway, because we are a medical facility, we have access to very good medical physicians, and we've got specialists that we defer to as well. So we've got back doctors, and so, and it doesn't seem to be a big head or where it's lost for a word, but where it's not a macho kind of thing, or that's just a bad word to use, but it's not about the doctors being right all the time. It's about finding out the solutions for the kid and get them to the right specialist, so that if it's a back issue, that that they see the right people basically. Sorry, that was a little
is Dr. Andrews heavily involved in it at UAB?
No, we go through UAB, so Dr. Garth is our main sports medicine, and Dr. Estes through most of those are all through UAB. But I'm not sure if Dr. Andrews he sees a lot of professional guys that come back, but I'm not sure if he has different offices now all over Alabama. And
so like in the NFL, when a guy hurt a knee, it was either Dr. Andrews or Dr. Stedman in Vail, and it was either like one or the other. Those two guys were like the wizards of orthopedists. So anything outside of that was you don't go see those guys. I just wondered if because he's in Birmingham, I just wondered if he was involved.
Rehab in Vail, holy smokes. Sounds
got
legit.
an office in Boca Raton too.
Oh my god,
he's a smart guy. He's got all his offices in the right places.
bad knees in both places for different reasons.
Dr. Stedman. So the hilarious thing about Dr. Stedman's clinic, Steady's clinic was right at the base of in Vail, like right at the base of the ski slopes. So people literally would tear an ACL. And I shit you not, because I went there for my knee surgery. I was doing my rehab. A guy tore his knee on the ACL, and they carted him down, like they brought him down in like the toboggan right into the facility.
It's awesome.
He got
right onto a conveyor belt, and it just went.
They did the surgery within 3 hours of him tearing his ACL. Hadn't even swollen yet, and but then so like this amazing like facility right at the base of Vail Mountain. And so I remember being like, God, I wonder where Steady's house is. I mean, it's incredible. And so like the nurse was like, looked outside the window and pointed, and there was this huge mansion made of glass, like overlooking everything.
That's
and she's
amazing.
like, that's his home. And I'm like, you mean the Fortress of Solitude? Yeah, it's all glass. And he lived in the Fortress of Solitude. And I was like, God, he is Superman's grandfather. That's how I knew. Yeah, no, nice. Yeah, I mean, those guys are the world's best. So when you're in trouble, you got to call the best gunslinger you can.
Sick location. That's cool.
That is.
Like, I will have a hot toddy and reconstructive surgery, please.
I'm telling you, it's like the jet. You go in, conveyor belt on a stretcher, and then you come out with a hot toddy on skis again.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's like part of the chairlift. Amazing.
Stacey, one thing I did want to educate our listeners on is the CSCCA. So it's definitely the most comprehensive certification that I've been through. So I'd love to kind of educate them on the mission and the process and your involvement with the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I just can't say enough about Chuck and Becky Stiggins. I've never been a part of anything professionally where I knew that two people had the best interest of strength conditioning coaches. It just, every decision that they make, their first thought is, how will this affect strength conditioning and our coaches? And they truly, from financial decisions to who are we going to have at the conference, things like that. So, but really right now, I think we just got our accreditation, so within the last 3 years, and so now we're in our first cycle of CEUs, and so they that's been a huge undertaking for them. So a lot of their time and effort's been spent kind of finalizing that, and now we're on kind of that 3-year cycle to so at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel right now. And I don't know how often accreditation has to happen, but I pray for them next time they have to go through that, because it's a very long and enduring process. And we actually had to change. I don't know when you went through the testing, the practical testing portion, but we've changed it to be much more there's an accountability on our part as administrators of the test to really get what we need to make sure that those coaches have a basic knowledge of what we're asking, and if they were to take their first job. Whereas before it was depending on who you got, maybe you got a lot of questions during the test, or maybe you answered all the questions and now let's get to know you kind of thing. So it's very much more regimented now, and we have specific questions that we have to ask and about the program. Just as a recap of the test, is the practical portion of the test is 9 stations, basically 6 to 9 stations, and part of them are practical, as in you demonstrate a skill like a power clean or something like that and talk through it. And then their part is you have a week program that you write prior to the test, and there are certain questions that we ask about just to make sure that you can explain what it is that how you programmed for that particular team or that particular season. So
just a week? I had to do so much more. That's not fair.
Yeah, I think it's like a preseason or something, and they say kind of break it down into 1 week or something like that. So
yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun. I'm all about those challenges, and interesting in that we got to kind of go into an open room and we went and picked our table. And so I recognized just a couple badass coaches. So I went and just tried to see how I favored against the best in the biz. So I definitely had a lot of fun. And then the rest of the conference, it was really just kind of hang out and network.
Yeah. And I think it's cool that, it's all strength coaches that are doing exactly what you do on a day-to-day basis. Some of them have been in it like me for 25 years. Some are just starting. But the great thing about the conference is you can stop Mad Dog or Mickey Marotti and they'll stop and they'll talk shop with you. There's no hierarchy of, ooh, don't talk to that person. He's, like we talked about earlier, nothing's top secret. We all steal from each other, and we implement it our own way. And that's just the nature of our business. And there's very few people that actually create something and call it their own, so that's basically what we're doing. So
yeah, so different from your seminars that you lead that are so militant, and you're like a dictator and nobody can speak directly looking at you. And
well, Tex also claims to have invented the ring push-up. So
okay,
it's the ring handstand push-up.
I remember when Tex was going through the process. I mean, it seemed pretty elaborate, and again had nothing but good things to say. So I mean, we're embarking on our mission to try and educate people and contribute to creating better coaches and facilitating safer ways to train for athletes and everything that we talked about here. But if people wanted to learn more about the CSCCA, where would you point them?
I would just point them to their website, the www.cscca.org.
And that's it. Got it all laid out there. You guys don't got like a crazy Snapchat channel or anything?
I think there is. I think there's a Twitter account, but
well, that's a start.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody tweets anymore, but
just the president. Yeah.
School, so just the president.
Oh, dagger.
They do have a lot of videos and that kind of.
I think it's about that time, Stacey. Is there anything else you wanted to cover while we're I guess wrapping up here, or no?
Gosh, I just wanted to give my staff kudos. I've got a great staff. When I kind of took over as the director, I after 20-something years, I figured out I can't do it all by myself. And I think when people know what their role is, there's a lot more accountability. And these guys have taken off and just, they are total pros at what they do. Stuart Young is my education coordinator. Blake Klotz is our facilities and he just and our equipment guy. He's just on top of getting us the latest and greatest type things. My sports science guy, Adam Snow, and my mental health and conditioning coordinator is Adam Loftus. And we got a great group of interns right now that hopefully will get them jobs soon. And but I just want to give them some kudos because they make me look good, way better than I am, and and I learn from them every single day. And if you ever, when you hire people out there, just hire people better than you, because it'll only make you a better coach too.
And then take all the credit.
And then take all the credit.
Yes.
Exactly.
All right. Well, hey, Stacey, thanks so much, guys. And listen, Power Athlete listeners, go check it out. If you want to become a better coach, CSCCA is one of the road stops, right? So, Callie, anything else? Tex, anything else? Jay Welly?
Good.
That's it. And that's a wrap.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All right, thanks, guys.
It's a pleasure.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, Stacey.
You're welcome. Nice to meet y'all.
Ready? Bye.
Bye. Now it's time for you to empower your performance. To learn more about the CSCCA and their CEU accreditation program, head to www.cscca.org. There you'll find tons of vetted training resources and even internship and career opportunities. And it may have been a while since I've been on the podcast, but some things you just don't forget.
Do not forget, Callie, we are the premier podcast in strength and conditioning.
It's true.
It's tattooed on my lower back. How could I forget?
Right next to your
Ooh, and we are out of time. Until next time, bye!